Great. So in this activity, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our first little greenhouse activity, and there's going to be variations upon this. So what we're going to need is some kind of glass or plastic container. I just happen to have a plastic one in my office here. If you have a glass bowl, clear is best, is usually ideal. And you're also going to need your little white temperature sensor. And it's nice to have your OLED screen. You could use the 4-digit display just to display one piece of information if you want it to, which is totally fine. Or you can just use the microbit screen to display the information. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a pretty classic simple experiment. We're going to put our air and temperature and humidity sensor underneath our glass bowl, and we're going to wait for our data to appear on our screen. So let's get started. Alright, so we have two sensors that are going to need extensions, so let's get those installed first. So we're going to need a DHT22 sensor, which is for our air and humidity. And we also will need, under our extensions, the OLED one. And there's a number of those. The one that we often use the most is the Tinker Academy Tinker Kit. And when you click on that, you will get a couple of new blocks. And we're going to use the OLED block, which pops right up. Okay. So first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to initialize that screen. So when you click on the OLED block, and we're going to drag that into the on start so we can initialize it. Basically, it's telling the microbit, hey, you're going to have a screen attached to you. And remember that the screen only goes into your I2C port, okay, which is the port on the far left of the microbit and the Grove shield. Now, let's set up a couple of functions. So we've talked about functions a little bit, but let's go through them again. I'm going to set up a function, and the function again is just a kind of a mini program. So I'm going to call this function get air data. So this is a function that's going to serve as my program to get my air data. Okay. So I'm going to drag it back over here so it's closer to my forever loop and my on start loop. Okay, so let's add what we need. So in my air data, we're going to need to initialize our temperature sensor. So let's grab that query block. Okay, we're going to pop in that from DHT11 to DHT22. We're going to have it on pin P0, and again it's going to be right next to my I2C port. We can have up serial out port. If you wanted to see your data on your computer screen, you can say true to that, but if you don't have a PC or running the app for microbit, it doesn't matter. And you always want to say true to the 2-second query. Okay. And now we're going to need some variables because we need to collect some data. So let's create a couple of variables. I'm going to call my first variable air temp. And I'm going to make another variable, and I'm going to call it humidity. Alright, so now I've got my air temp and I've got my humidity variable. Here. So let's get some data. So I'm going to go into my variables. I'm going to set my air temperature variable to get my reading of my data from the air temperature. Now, one of the challenges with our little air temperature and humidity sensor is that if you ping it or if you try to read data from it too often, it has a tendency to crash. So we want to slow this thing down a little bit. And so usually how we slow things down in our program is we just put in a pause statement from the basic block. And that's going to put it in for 2 seconds. All right, because that allows it to kind of cool down, then it gets ready to get pinged again. That's why there's this wait 2 seconds after query in this block. Okay. Now, the next data I want to get is I want to get my temperature data. Okay. So I'm going to set humidity to, and I am going to read, oops, I picked the wrong one, read humidity. Alright, so now in my get air data, I've got my air temperature initialized. I am going to set my air temperature. I'm going to pause for 2 seconds. I'm going to set my humidity for 2 seconds. And oftentimes I have put in another pause statement at the end of this. Just again, to give our little temperature and humidity sensor some time to recover from getting red. Okay, so that's my air temperature data. Now let's make another function, and I'm going to make this function, and I'm going to call it show data. Okay. So again, when we think about this as a larger problem, what I'm needing to do is I'm needing to get my data, and I'm needing to show my data. Okay, so I've kind of got two problems, and I'm making two separate programs. Then we're going to bring them together and merge them in my forever loop. So show data. Now we've got multiple options to show the data. You can show it on your microbit screen, which you can, but you know it's a scrolling. It can be a little pain. You can lose track of it. You know, you have to stay focused on it for a while. Or you can have the data show up on the little screen and just read it from there. So that's what we're going to do. So from our OLED screen, what we're wanting to do is we're going to show string. That's going to be some text. So I'm going to say air temp equals, and now what do I want it to show me? So also under OLED, I'm going to have it show me a number. Okay. That number that I'm going to show is going to be my air temperature data. Okay. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing for humidity. I'm going to go show my string. Again, and string is just a fancy computer language term for text, and this is going to be humidity. Okay, and I am going to use my screen again, and I am going to have it show me another number, and this number is going to be from my variables again. This one's going to be humidity. All right, so now, oops, I put them all in my forever loop. They should have gone in my function show data. Alright, so now I've got a function show data on my screen. Now there's one thing we're missing in here is what will happen is this program will totally work, but it will show these phrases over and over again. So oftentimes a good practice that you can do is you want to clear the screen after you finish with it. But there's one step that you also need to include to slow it down, is a pause block. So we're going to put a pause block right before that clear, and I'm going to say 3 seconds. So I'm going to say 3,000 because things are in milliseconds in computer land. So 3,000 means 3 seconds, and that's going to give me actual time to read this. If you don't put that pause statement in, what you'll see is you'll see it flash on the screen and it'll go away really fast. Now in my forever loop, now that I've got my two functions done, what I want to do is from my functions block, I am going to say call get my air data, and I'm going to say call show data. Right? So this forever loop is going to call this function. It's going to run these commands. Then it will say, oh, go find show data. Then it will run these commands. Okay. Now one thing that is sometimes useful to do here is you can put in some text also in your function and get air data. The reason being why is because there's about 6 seconds of running time here, which can be a long time for some students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a show string right at the very top, and I'm going to say getting data, please wait. And that's just going to let me know, hey, this is starting to work, and I'm going to be doing stuff. And what I want to do is after that, I'm going to clear my display. But I'm going to put a little bit of a pause statement in here, not long of one, just so I have some time to read that. So I'm going to put in a 1 second pause. So now my function for get air data is going to show me the string getting data, please wait. It's going to do 1,000 for a pause. It's going to clear that, and then it's going to activate my air temperature, and then it's going to collect some data. All right, then it's going to show me that data on the screen. All right, and so there's our very simple project around temperature. And what we're going to want to do as our experiment is make yourself a data table, with time and temperature, and spend about half an hour and have about half an hour of it with it off. Go look at it, maybe every 5 minutes. You don't have to look at it very often because it will stabilize. And jot down your numbers that you see for temperature and humidity. And then get your glass or plastic, put it on it, and see what changes. It's best if you do this in the sun, because as we all know from sitting in cars in the summertime, that they get hotter because the glass traps the infrared heat, and you're going to see the same thing. So if you have a nice clear plastic bowl, clear glass, it doesn't matter what size it is. You just want to make sure that you have it where it's in sunlight and it's clear enough for the sunlight to penetrate and get through. And that is going to be our data collection that we're going to tackle for the week. I have my file downloaded, and what we'll see is that we have our data showing up on our screen. And again, if the data shows up too fast for you to read it, you just put in additional time for the pause and have it slow down. And then you can read it. Because we don't need to collect the data all that often, or send the ping to the temperature and humidity sensor, because the temperature isn't going to change that rapidly. But it looks like everything is working, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to test it out. So set up a data table and let's record some data.